Welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast with your host, Alvin Bonds II. Join us each week as Alvin explores the relationship between leadership and families by interviewing leaders in different fields all over the world. Alvin believes that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families.
Hello, and welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast. I am your host, Alvin Bonds II, and this is episode 20. Today, I interview Kyle Brost. But before I get to that interview, I'd like to talk just a moment about value. One of the things Kyle talks about in the interview is about value. How are you bringing value to your work? How are you bringing value to people's lives? One of the questions that Kyle asks is, how are people's lives changed? That question is directed at anybody. So I invite you just to reflect on yourself and how are you affecting people's lives? How are people's lives changed by your work? Whether your job is to sweep the floor, or you are the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, or you are a stay-at-home mom or dad. It doesn't matter. You have the power to effect change in people's lives and to bring value. So I invite you, as you listen to my interview with Kyle, to reflect on these things. What value have you brought or are you bringing to your situation? Kyle Brost is a founder and principal consultant at Choice Strategy Group and the CEO of Spark Policy Institute. He is also an author and contributor for Forbes, Thrive Global, Influencive, as well as a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Kyle is passionate about the art of strategy for life, leadership, and business, and believes value is maximized when people and businesses know how to think strategically. He enjoys spending time with his wife and their 3 sons. It's an honor to have Kyle on for today's podcast. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Tell us about you.
So I run a couple of different consulting firms. One is a corporate strategy firm called Choice Strategy Group, where we focus on helping organizations develop long-term strategies and then build the capabilities required to be successful in those strategies. And then my other firm is called Spark Policy Institute, and we work with foundations and nonprofits and government agencies our tagline is to do good even better, which means we do a lot of research and evaluation in terms of how people are trying to make good social change and what things are actually working and having the impact that people hope they have. And so both organizations, we focus a lot on strategy, a lot on capability, and we try to back that up with some very solid research and evaluation. And then on the personal side, I do some writing for Forbes and Thrive Global and Influencive. I've got a book that I'm working on, and I do a little bit of executive coaching on the side.
That's pretty amazing. And I had an opportunity to look at your video online. One of the things you mentioned is you didn't identify yourself as being entrepreneurial as a child, but I imagine this came from someplace. Where did this, vision to create something, where did that come from?
I think it's kind of always been there, a desire to do something new and different. It doesn't mean it has to be new and different for the world, but something new and different for me, something that was exciting to me. And so I think the entrepreneurial kind of spirit and drive, that just desire of wanting to do things that were new and exciting and that I could learn from. And I felt like if I was in a job or a role, that I wasn't quite getting that. I wasn't getting those new, exciting things. And I didn't have the freedom or flexibility to explore how to do things on my own way. So a lot of people enjoy learning, but I also really enjoy failing and messing up and just discovering it for myself. Even today, running my companies, I could go hire people to do my web design or web development, but I'm the kind of person who likes to do the research and learn it and experiment with it on my own before I go ask for somebody else's help. And so I think it was just that innate drive or desire to learn how to do things through experience. that led me into entrepreneurship.
What I thought was very interesting, you talked in your video about your experiences after graduating high school and spending 6 months on an oil rig, and just the realization of needing to adapt on the fly. And I think that's a really, really amazing quality that you have. Would you tell us a little bit about your purpose and passion?
So my purpose and passion are to help individuals live a satisfying and fulfilling life. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I care the most about. And I try to carry that into what I do on the corporate side as well as on the social side, meaning that all of the engagements and things that we work on ultimately are driving toward that purpose of how is it making people's lives better. And that's something that's unique in our strategy work, is that we force our clients to think about what they're going to do outside of just profit. So a lot of activities with regard to corporate strategy are centered around how can we become more profitable, how can we dominate competitors. And those things aren't bad in and of themselves, but we push our clients to say, okay, if we meet the target of, and the numbers vary, but if we meet the target of 5% more profitability, how does anybody's life change?
Yes.
And we force them to actually answer that question, to actually say, how will our people, our employees' lives change if we hit our profitability target? How will our customers' lives change if we hit our profitability target? Because we really we think that profit for profit's sake is kind of pointless. And so, my purpose, my passion is really in helping individuals experience life, in the best ways that they can. And that bleeds into the work that we do on the strategy, and then clearly on the social good side, because that's exclusively what it's focused on.
This mindset that you have is something that I personally can relate to and understand, but it may not be something that a lot of people gravitate to. Like you said, more people focus on, profits and increase in profits. What helped inform this mindset that you have? Where did that come from?
I think it was lived experience. So I got into, first I was an entrepreneur when I was younger. I ran a couple of companies, and my own motivation was profit at that point. I thought that profit was the out to freedom and being able to do what I wanted to do and have a happy life. And I found through my own experience that it didn't always play out that way, that, we could be making all sorts of profit, but I was still stressed out and anxious, and I didn't use my time very wisely. And so I, from my own experience, started to see how the amount of profit I was making versus my satisfaction with life didn't really have a great correlation. And then I started to see it when I really went into corporate strategy as a consultant, where I would work with a company and we would set strategy and we'd create these action plans and we'd implement them. And then 12 months later, I'd go back into the business and we'd talk about how they'd done. We'd look at their progress and we'd see these numbers. And I'd say, wow, you guys, increased it 5% in profitability. And sometimes 5% is tremendous numbers, right?
Yes.
I mean, millions upon millions of dollars. And I'd say, wow, you guys increased 5% in profitability. What did you do with it? And the room would go silent. And people literally didn't know. They didn't know what they had done with all of this extra money. And then that's how we got to that question I mentioned earlier, which is, how are your lives different? So you made an extra 5%, or you made an extra $100 million, and sometimes it was smaller if it was a small business, but you made this extra money. How are people's lives different? How is your life different? And the room would always go silent. People couldn't answer it. And so it became this, I just started to see and recognize through lived experience and through consulting the disconnect between profit and satisfaction and fulfillment.
Wow, that is powerful, the way you explain that. And it really is life-changing if people would apply that. And I'm interested in knowing, all this relates to leadership. What is your philosophy of leadership?
So, I really think a leader is somebody who helps make sense of the world that their employees are in. And that world's different for, I don't mean this in some kind of foo-foo way. What I mean is, if I'm in an organization, in a business, we have competitors and we have a market and we have clients and we have customers and we have people that are being impacted. And all of that gets really messy and complex. And it's easy to say, I don't want to deal with all of the messiness and the complexity. I just want to do my one little job, or I want to stick to my one role. And I think a leader's job is to make sense of all of that so that their people can be excited and motivated by the stuff that they're doing, the work that they're doing. So a leader's job is to simplify those messages, to help them prioritize what they're doing, and to help them see the impact that their work and effort is having on the goals that are being set, both individual professional goals and organizational goals. And I think when leaders do that really well, when they help make sense of it, then it's motivating to their employees, and their employees can connect these, everyday tasks and their role with these bigger, more motivating and exciting things that happen within organizations, and the good that's happening as organizations, meet customer needs and create products and services.
And I'm curious to know, in your corporate strategy, as you're doing that with businesses, what are some themes or some commonalities you've discovered, with different businesses in terms of changing this mindset, if you will?
I think the biggest theme that I discovered is people deep down really want to have this conversation. Initially, when the question gets asked in a corporate setting, in a boardroom or some executive meeting, people aren't used to it because they're used to those conversations either internally, they're processing them internally, or they're with their family. So they're not used to that kind of question or conversation in the corporate environment.
Yes.
So there's a little bit of resistance initially, but once people get used to that idea of having that conversation, the biggest thing I've realized is that people want to have it. They want to know that what they're doing is good and meaningful within their career and within their business. And so once we can open that up, I found that most executives, most leaders, most employees at companies are excited to talk about what is the value we're really creating and how are we impacting people's lives. The other really nice thing about it, and I've shared this example a few other times, is it's so much easier to motivate your people when the conversation is around how you're impacting people's lives and the value that you're creating. So one example I use is a veterinarian that I worked with down in Texas. It was a little smaller business, but still a really successful company. And before working with us, her main metric was around the number of different procedures that the doctors and technicians performed and how much profit or revenue was coming off of those procedures. So they constantly looked at that kind of data and numbers. And she said it was so hard to motivate her people because her people just didn't really care about the profit. They didn't really care about the procedures. And so it was just this hard conversation where she was trying to create metrics that she could evaluate her company on, but those metrics weren't helping her people.
Yes.
And so after we went through strategy, she shifted to just talking about how many pets they had helped and then setting targets for how many pets they could potentially help. And she said when they shifted from that, number of procedures and revenue to the number of pets being helped, that she didn't have to try to motivate her people anymore.
Wow.
When they looked at that data and that information, they motivated themselves because that's what they came into the industry for anyway, was to help pets. And so, she didn't have to try to excite them or get them to focus more on how many more pets they could help because they already wanted to do that. So they'd see, oh, wow, we helped, 1,000 pets over the last 3 months. Man, if we pushed ourselves, we could help 1,500 pets, and that excited them. And so it's those kind of things that I think you start to see those themes that people really do want to have that conversation. They're just not used to it being in the corporate or professional environment.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I'm a marriage and family therapist, so I have the opportunity to help people really identify some of the individual struggles that may hinder them. And I love that you can help, connect that to people at a corporate, business level. I wonder, how does leadership for you, what does that look like at home with you and your family?
Oh gosh, honestly, I wish I was as good a leader in my home as I am in my businesses. For some reason, it can be harder in my home because frankly, I feel so much more invested in my own children.
Yeah.
I love business. I love the organizations I work with and the good that we're doing, but it doesn't compare to my children.
Right.
And so it's hard because it's harder to manage my passions. It's harder to manage those differences in personalities. So I would say that one, it's harder, but I think that a lot of the same principles still apply. So, one of the things I said was that leaders make sense of the environment. Well, that's one of the things that I'm trying to help my children with, right? I have a 6-year-old, and he's just learning what the environment means. He's just learning what school experience is like, and he's learning, how people react to his personality and how to make friends and how to choose friends and, how to do what the teacher is asking. And so I'm as a leader, I'm trying to help him make sense of those things in his own, using his own words. And that's a challenge, but I think it's the same, right? I'm just trying to help him make sense of the world and understand how he fits into all of that.
Yeah. What is a legacy that you want to leave for your children? What do you want them to be able to know, to have, and to be able to do in their lives?
Money is definitely not it, so I would take that off the table right away. In terms of, quite frankly, I don't care if my children, make a phenomenal living or not. What I really want them to do is be able to explore and learn through experience. So we actually, as a family, we have a family mission statement, and as part of that mission statement, we actually have priorities that we use, and we use those priorities in how we make family decisions as well as how we choose to spend our money. And one of the first priorities that we have, well, the very first one is that we always act out of love. But the second priority is that we learn through shared experiences. And so when we're talking about potential vacations, when we're talking about how we're going to invest or spend our money, the two criteria, the second one being what kind of shared experiences can we get out of this? And so we try to avoid spending money and doing things that wouldn't create a good shared experience. Yeah. But so I think in terms of a legacy, it's that they get to have those really powerful experiences that teach them about others and teach them about themselves.
And would you mind sharing with us, you mentioned about this mission statement for your family, and I don't see a lot of families that have that. How did you discover that? How did you create that for your family?
Well, some of my work is helping organizations, in strategy, helping organizations create mission statements, and then create some priorities that come out of those. And I noticed, in the corporate sphere, how much of an impact having that kind of statement and priority list can have on how an organization makes decisions. And my wife and I, we've been married 10 years now. And I think it was probably 5 years into our marriage where we really started to feel and sense that sometimes we had differences of opinion. Not that we hadn't noticed that before, but I think it just kind of came to fruition, about 5 years into our marriage, where we had some pretty big decisions and we had big differences in opinion. And so just as a way to make those decisions without either one of us feeling like, we were shafted or being frustrated with the other person, we decided to use some of the corporate tools I had and write a mission statement to help us make some big decisions. And the way we started it was we just started to outline exactly what you asked, which is, what are our big priorities in life together? Yeah. What can we agree on are our biggest drivers and motivators and priorities? And so we brainstormed just a massive list, and then we started to whittle it down because a huge list is not a priority list. So we started to whittle it down until we got to about 4 or 5 kind of really key things that we said, you know what, at the end of the day, these are the 5 things that matter the most to us. And we created those as our priorities, and then we actually wrote our mission statement based off of those priorities.
Wow. That is phenomenal. If a family, let's say I have a couple that is just starting out in their marriage, where would you encourage them to start in terms of, developing a mission statement or even just developing, a consistency in their marriage? Where would they start?
I think it's some internal exploration. So it's asking yourself, what do I really value the most? Do I value affection? Do I value physical things? Do I value experiences? What is it that makes me the happiest? When am I in my element? And it's understanding for yourself what that looks like, and then comparing those. So, I personally do it for me. My wife or a significant other does it for them. We bring them together and we start to see where there's overlap and where there's potential conflict, where you probably heard of love languages and those kind of things, where, my way or my priorities are different from my spouse's. And so I think it's starting individually, then lining them up together and identifying where there's consistency and where there are differences, and then saying together, how are we going to pull this, how are we going to make this consistent between the two of us? So that means that, one person every now and then is going to have to sacrifice something.
Yes.
I have to give up certain things that I may want, knowing that that this piece is more important to my significant other. And there are times that, she does the same thing. But I think it's first starts with you getting very clear individually what it is that drives you and excites you, and then comparing that with your spouse. And then the next step is really trying to create something together that says, you know what, together we can absolutely commit to these things.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. In my experiences as a marriage and family therapist, I have the chance to work with different families and different makeups and dynamics. And one thing that I do see a lot of is brokenness in families, whether it's from divorce or just a whole range of things. But I personally believe that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families. What do you think about that?
I think that the family atmosphere provides, when it is structured intentionally and meaningfully, provides the best avenue for developing individuals. Within an organization, and again, I pull my lived experience within organizations into my family experience, but within an organization, if you really want people to excel and develop and be successful, you have to provide them with support. And you have to provide them with room to fail and learn from their mistakes. And you have to provide them with guidance and direction in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. Well, all of those same things happen within the family. So we try to provide support. We try to provide a route and avenue for our children to fail and to learn from those mistakes. We try to provide them with guidance and direction of how to set priorities in their own life. And so I completely agree with you that when the family is structured purposely and meaningfully, that it does provide the single best avenue for the development of individuals.
Yes. Well, Kyle, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about leadership, about being intentional, or just I love this mindset of the lived experience that you talk about. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think one thing in terms of lived experience and enjoying experience is to not get so caught up on personal mistakes, meaning our entire lives are about growing and developing and progressing. I'm going to be better in 10 years than I am today, and I'm better today than I was 10 years ago, but I'm far from perfect. I make plenty of mistakes, as well as everybody, but I have this vision and idea that as long as I'm moving forward, that's what matters. As long as I'm getting better in some areas, that's what matters. And I think there's too many people out there that when they make a mistake, they feel like it speaks to their self-worth. And that's something that has always kind of hung me up. I hate it when people feel like a mistake speaks to their self-worth, when they really should be looking at their lifespan and saying, am I growing? Am I getting better throughout the course of my life? And maybe I'm doing it at a different rate than somebody else, but personally, am I getting better? Am I improving? And to me, that's one of the biggest factors. I would just say to individuals, to families, to leaders, rather than calling yourself out and reflecting on mistakes that you make, just look at what growth and progress you're making and focus on growth and progress, not these big, huge accomplishments that somehow you think reflect who you are as an individual. It's the growth and progress that really matters.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to subscribe as well as providing a rating and review. Every week, I will interview a different leader and invite them to share with us their views and perspective on the relationship between leadership and family. Be sure to visit my website. It's www.alvinbonds2nd.com. That's ALVINBONDSII.com. Have a great day.